In today's episode, we've got the bread and salt diet, oddly timed haircuts, and an insufficient blurb. It's time for your Jewish week. Hey everyone, welcome to Your Jewish Week, the podcast for everything Jewish in the week ahead. I'm Rabbi Dovey. As always, this podcast is produced by Chabad.org and dedicated to all our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land. May Hashem keep them safe from all harm, and may all the hostages finally be freed to return to their families and loved ones. Today is Sunday, the 27th of Iyar, and if you're planning on spending Shabbat camped out on the roof of my house, please refrain, but if you insist on doing so anyways, be advised that candlelighting time this week comes in at 7:37 p.m. If you're not going to be there, congratulations on being a law-abiding citizen. As a reward, you get to look up halachic times for your location at Chabad.org/times. Starting us off, as always, with the weekly Torah portion, this week we'll be studying Parshas Bamidbar, the first parsha of the fourth book of the Torah, also called Bamidbar. In English, it's called the Book of Numbers, and for once, I'm not going to gripe about the English term for this because this particular one is very well-deserved. We'll see why in a minute. We open on Sunday with Hashem commanding Moshe to count the Jewish people and appointing a nasi, a leader, for each of the 12 tribes to help Moshe with the count. Monday, the Book of Numbers starts living up to its name. We'll get a detailed rundown of the exact population of each tribe, followed by a grand total for the entire Jewish people, 603,550. Although it's important to keep in mind that this number does not take into account men over 60 or under 20, women, or Levites, so the total population was considerably more, probably closer to 3 million. Tuesday, we learn about the formation in which the Jews would set up camp when they stopped, and on Wednesday, we'll learn about the special role of the Levites. Thursday, the Levites are going to get their own special mini-census. Unlike the census for the rest of the nation, this one covers a much wider age range, 1 month old and above. Also on Thursday, we'll lay out how the Levites would set up camp within the greater Israelite encampment. Friday, there's more counting. This time, it's the firstborns. Now, we're not just counting firstborns because we ran out of things to count. There's actually a reason for it. Originally, the special tasks performed by the Levites were supposed to be handled by the firstborns from each family, but this privilege was taken from them when they sinned with the golden calf and instead given to the tribe that didn't participate in the sin, the tribe of Levi. Now, the way this worked was that every firstborn had his special status transferred to a corresponding Levite. The problem was that there were more firstborns than there were Levites, so someone still got an outstanding debt in a way. He had an obligation to serve in the Mishkan, but he's been barred from doing it and no one's doing it for him. So Moshe counted the firstborns, figured out how many extras there were, 273 for those keeping score at home, and then he had a randomly selected group of 273 firstborns redeem their obligation for a fee of 5 silver shekels. And in Shabbat's reading, Moshe is going to make one more census, this time a particular family of the Levites, the dynasty of Kehat, with yet another adjusted age range. This time it's 30 to 50. And to wrap it up, we review the special duties of this dynasty, which involved packing up and transporting the holy vessels when the Jews traveled. Parshas Bamidbar contains 159 verses, with the memory key being the name Chilkiyahu. As always, check out the link in the show notes for more insight into this week's key. Moving on to the weekly Tanya, as we mentioned last week, we're going to spend Sunday to Friday wrapping up the first volume of the Tanya. We're in the middle of a lengthy discussion on the way that Hashem's presence manifests itself in the world. The crux of it all is that the Shekhinah, which is just a fancy way to say Hashem's presence, uses Torah as a vehicle to enclose itself in each of the successive spiritual worlds. Now, I gotta admit to you guys, as someone who loves explaining Hasidus in English and takes a certain pride in it, summarizing such a nuanced discussion with a little blurb like I just gave you is pretty irritating. It's like an itch I can't scratch. I'm aware of how many undefined terms are just left dangling all over the place, and I've got this urge to go crazy and explain everything in a way that would satisfy me if I was a beginner. But being that this is a summary and not a Tanya podcast, I can only encourage you to go learn the Tanya at length inside and to acquaint yourself with the ideas in a more thorough way. Up to Tuesday, we'll be finishing chapter 52, and Wednesday to Friday, we'll be doing chapter 53, the final chapter, and just like that, we've completed the first volume of the Tanya. Congratulations to all who didn't miss a day over the past 5 months and stayed on the wagon as we learned all about the animal and godly souls, our relationship with Hashem, and how to mold our behavior and emotions to be better aligned with the vision that He intended for us. Shabbat will begin the second volume of Tanya, which is going to be a lot more philosophical in nature. But first, we've got a little introduction. I say little, but it's not really that little. It's short, but it's so packed with meaning that I literally have an entire book in my house dedicated solely to this introduction. It even has its own title. When's the last time you heard of a book introduction with a title? It's called Chinuch Katan, which means educating a child. And that's because it centers on a verse about education. The verse tells us to educate a child according to his way, so that even when he gets older, he will not depart from it. In other words, if your kid is 2 years old, don't try teaching him algebra. Teach him how to crawl so that someday, when he's older, he'll still be crawling. And if that sounds funny to you, you're on the same page as the Alter Rebbe, because that's more or less the question he asks. Check it out for yourself to see what I mean. We'll be learning the Chinuch Katan all the way through to next Tuesday, which happens to be the second day of Shavuot. Moving on to the daily Rambam, the 3-chapter and Sefer HaMitzvos tracks will start off Sunday bright and early with a new set of laws, the laws of Sota. The Sota is a woman who is suspected of being unfaithful to her husband. The Torah prescribes a supernatural test to determine the truth of the matter. We'll wrap up those laws on Monday, which also brings us to the end of the 4th book of the Rambam, on to book 5, the book of holiness, which discusses the restrictions that Hashem places upon us in keeping with our role as His holy people, a light unto the nations. Specifically, it deals with forbidden relationships and prohibited foods. Starting off with the forbidden relationships, it's quite a long list, but just to give you guys a representative sample here, we are forbidden to marry our grandmothers, mothers-in-law, and a cow. Well, any animal really, but it's funnier when it's needlessly specific. We'll cover all the details of these laws straight through to Shabbat. Along the way, we'll learn some very fundamental points in the laws of family purity, which is, of course, a very important aspect of Jewish married life. If you're listening to this and you don't yet observe the laws of family purity, or if you need a refresher, I highly recommend you hop on Chabad.org/mikvah, that's MIKVA, to find out more. In the 1-chapter track, we're chugging right along on the laws of lost objects on Sunday and Monday, beginning a new set of laws on Tuesday, Hilchos Chovel Umazik, the laws of ouchies and boo-boos. As the name suggests, these are the laws concerning a man who inflicts an ouchie and or a boo-boo on his fellow or his property. The Torah prescribes various categories of restitution, taking into account the severity and extent of the ouchie, as well as the socioeconomic context of the boo-boo. As always, if you'd like to learn more about anything you just heard, or if you're ready to join one of the daily study cycles, check out the show notes for links and resources. All right, with the weekly overview done, it's time to take it day by day. As we have the past 6 weeks, we count the Omer every evening after nightfall, counting down the days to the giving of the Torah on Shavuot. We're really going into the home stretch here. This is going to be our last full week before the holiday, which is going to be next Monday and Tuesday. This would definitely be a good time to start making those holiday preparations, maybe moving around your schedule so you can take the time off. We'll be reading the 10 Commandments during the morning services the first day of Shavuot. It's really important for everyone, men, women, children, even little babies, to be there Monday for the reading. Also, there's almost certainly a delicious dairy lunch to go along with it, as is customary, so hop on to Chabad.org/10 Commandments to locate the closest reading to you. You can search by city or U.S. zip code. Jumping all the way to Wednesday, the first of Sivan is Rosh Chodesh, the head of the month of Sivan. As we've mentioned several times in the past, the head of the month is marked by additions in our prayers, the Hallel, Musaf, and a special Torah reading, as well as the Ya'aleh v'Yavo in both our prayers and the grace after meals. It's also a minor holiday, and just as the body is directed by the head of the month sets the tone for how the following month will go, so make it count. Also, starting from Rosh Chodesh and continuing all the way to the 12th of the month, we skip the Tachlin portion in our daily prayers. In Jewish history, Sunday gives us our first Shavuot-related historical event. Expect more in the coming days as we follow our ancestors in their final days of preparation for the giving of the Torah. On this day, the first of Sivan, the Jews arrived at Mount Sinai and camped there. Interestingly, when the Torah records this event, it uses the singular form vayichan rather than the plural form vayachanu. Essentially, it refers to the entire Jewish nation as if they were a single individual. And our sages tell us that Torah is indicating the profound unity the Jewish people felt at that moment. They camped as one man with one heart, eagerly anticipating the giving of the Torah. Thursday, the 2nd of Sivan, we've got our next Shavuot-related event. The day after the Jews' arrival, Moshe ascended Mount Sinai for the first time to meet with Hashem and plan the upcoming shindig. At that meeting, Hashem declared his intention to distinguish the Jewish people as an Am Segula, a treasured nation, and Mamleches Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. Because of these awesome, history-altering proclamations, the 2nd of Sivan has become known as Yom HaMiyuchas. Kind of hard to translate that exactly, but Chabad.org calls it the Day of Distinction, and I guess that works pretty well, so we'll go with that. Friday, the 3rd of Sivan, we've got another historical mile marker in the same vein. This was the day that Hashem instructed the Jews, through Moshe, to put a fence around Mount Sinai and begin a period of preparation in advance of the giving of the Torah 3 days later. In commemoration of this event, we observe a 3-day prep period of our own. It's called the 3 days of Hagbala, and I am very happy to announce that the Sfira restrictions on cutting hair, listening to music, and holding wedding celebrations is lifted. So go ahead, put on some of your favorite music, crash the closest wedding, and give yourself a haircut on the dance floor. See if I care. Actually, hang on, scratch that. The Kabbalah and Chabad custom is to hold off on the haircuts until the day before Shavuot itself, which this year is next Sunday. So if you can handle being a little fluffy for 2 more days, hang in there till then. Shabbat, the 4th of Sivan, marks the day that Moshe began writing down the first portion of the written Torah, from the first verse of Genesis all the way until the middle of Exodus, the account of the giving of the Torah. Essentially, he transcribed the Torah's account of everything that had happened until then. Needless to say, this was still only a transcription of the Torah written by Hashem himself. Moshe only acted as the vehicle to transmit it to us. If you're interested in learning more about how and when the Torah was written, I've got the perfect article for you. It's called How and When the Torah Was Written. And it's all about how the Torah was written, and furthermore, when the Torah was written. And so in summary, it's about how and when the Torah was written, which makes the title of the article very apt indeed. Anyway, I'll attach a link to that in the show notes so that you too can know how and when the Torah was written. And if you want some entertainment when you're done, go read the comment section. There's like 135 of them. Chabad.org comments are the best. Some of them are just so bizarre. There's hours of fun to be had. Anyway, stay tuned for next week when we'll pick up the historical events leading up to the giving of the Torah and, of course, the holiday of Shavuot itself. This Shabbat, we read the final chapter of Pirkei Avos, although, as I mentioned, this isn't actually part of Pirkei Avos itself. It's a collection of teachings about Torah learning that were compiled into a digest to kind of psych us up as we head into the giving of the Torah. Many have the custom to continue studying these 6 chapters in a rotating cycle all the way to Rosh Hashanah, but for those who don't, this is the grand finale, so let's take a look at the cool stuff we've got this week. And as always, I'll attach a link to the chapter itself in the show notes. In the second Mishnah this week, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi tells us that the only person who can truly be called free is the one who learns Torah. I think this is an interesting contrast to the prevailing thinking in our modern age, when somehow we all got the idea that freedom means doing whatever you want, even if it's essentially stupid and meaningless and ultimately self-destructive. Definitely some food for thought there. In the third Mishnah, we learn about how much respect we should give to those who teach us Torah, even if they've only taught us a single concept or even a single word. The proof text for this comes from King David, who referred to his advisor Achitophel with tremendous reverence, despite the fact that Achitophel only taught him 2 things. And also despite the fact that Achitophel was not exactly a model teacher, shall we say. He abandoned King David in favor of his son Avshalom, who tried to kill him. So I think we'd have forgiven King David for being a little snippy with him, and yet he still spoke of him with nothing but respect. But what I really want to highlight is Mishnah 4, which always stood out to me as an interesting one. The Mishnah tells us that the way to acquire Torah is to eat bread and salt, a small bit of water, and sleep on the ground. In other words, live a really Spartan life, except for the part of Sparta where they threw people into wells. And the implication there, I guess, is that living a comfortable life, a satisfying diet, a soft bed, all that somehow dulls you from really tuning into Torah. The only way to do it is to do it poor. And even as a kid, this kind of bothered me, I mean, most of us like nice things, at least nicer things than bread, salt, water, and the floor. And this also seems to clash with something we learned earlier in last week's chapter of Pirkei Avos. It says, whoever fulfills the Torah in poverty will ultimately fulfill it in wealth. Makes it sound like having plenty isn't an obstacle to Torah, right? Otherwise, that would be kind of a weird promise. So the Rebbe straightens this all out in a fascinating talk. He brings in a teaching from the Medrash, which tells us that the Torah was only given to those who ate the mun, the miraculous bread that fell from the heavens to feed the Jews in the desert. In other words, the fact that that generation ate the mun somehow made them the ideal generation to receive the Torah. Now, the special thing about the mun was that it came straight from Hashem. They couldn't stockpile it. Every day the Jews went to sleep with their pantries empty. They were totally reliant on Hashem to provide mun for the next day, as he had the day before. That experience gave the Jews a unique perspective on how dependent they were on their Creator. There was no way for them to fool themselves. There was no sense of security. It was either Hashem fed them or they starved tomorrow. There was no saving it. There was no buying it. You couldn't even collect more than the set allotment or it would miraculously disappear. That was the kind of generation who received the Torah, a generation who had all their needs met, and at the same time were constantly, inescapably aware of their complete helplessness, their complete dependence on Hashem. And that's the key to understanding what's going on here. When someone is poor, he has that same lack of complacency. He's hungry. He's got his feet to the fire. He knows how little he has to offer, and thus he opens himself up to Hashem. But the thing is, you don't actually need to be poor to experience that feeling. In our generation especially, the Rebbe has reiterated on many occasions that Jews should be wealthy, have large houses and plentiful resources, and use all of that out for the purpose of bringing Mashiach. At the same time, however, we must still remember that it all comes from Hashem. As secure as we feel, as full as our bellies are, as cozy as our beds are, we never lose sight of the fact that Hashem is providing us all those things for a reason, to turn the physical into spiritual, to elevate the world around us and bring about the final redemption. So this week, as you study the teaching of the Mishnah, don't give away your mattress and commit yourself to the bread and salt diet. Instead, think about the gifts Hashem has given you in your life and how you can use those gifts to make the world just a little better in the week ahead. Your Jewish Week is produced by Chabad.org, written and recorded by me, Rabbi David Paltiel. Theme music by Levi Gloshak.